This last week, I've worked harder than I ever imagined as I began setting up the foundation for an outdoor kitchen cover. What seemed so simple in my mind had more twists and turns than a Rubik's Cube. Let's begin at the beginning. The first thing I needed to do was mark off where the 8 by 12 foot roof would fit around the outdoor bar. That was simple enough. I just needed to spray where those measurements fit around the existing bar. As I did the measurements, I realized I would get pretty close to the shade tree, but it couldn't be helped because the roof had to be long enough to cover not only the bar, but also the storage cabinet I built. Sunny Girl, of course, had to do her inspection while I worked. I planned to put up 6 posts, but because the last 2 posts would be close to the tree and probably big roots, I decided to just do the first 4 posts to get a solid setup and later tackle the heavy root work for the last 2 posts. My next stop was to head off to the big box store for concrete to set up the post anchors. Once I had the 3 bags I needed, the plan was to move them to the screen porch until I was ready to use them. Keep in mind, each bag weighs about 60 pounds. This job requires precise measurement, so I found a great self-leveling laser on Amazon that was reasonably priced to line things correctly. The only downside was that the marks did not show up under full sun, so I had to wait until just before dark to put down my stakes. I made a square template that would help me position each anchor hole and spray painted where they would go. With that done, the next day I was ready to dig out the spray painted squares so I could stay within the shape I wanted. As soon as I began digging, I ran into some good-sized roots that required me to bring out the heavy artillery in the reciprocating saw. So now the fun really begins. The same thing happened on the second hole, but I was able to use some snippers, a small shovel, and a sharp knife to cut through most of the roots. And so it went, hole by hole. I even had time to test just how well the anchors would fit in the squares I dug. By now, I also realized I should save some of the dirt I was removing for the garden as topsoil. So things were moving along. To complete digging the squares, I also had to move the cabinet. Thank goodness it was lightweight and just bulky. I thought I'd caught a break once I got to the last hole, as a big root was just outside the frame of the square. But silly me. I missed the big root on top, but there was another big one below the surface that once again required me to bring out the big gun. I've cut this short to save you a few brain cells, but this took quite a while. I once again took out the laser and used black paint to mark where each line would intersect from hole to hole. Day 3, and I was ready to bring in the concrete to begin filling the holes. I began by adding concrete to my bucket, and later learned there's a technique to this, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I added water and used my paint stirrer to begin mixing it, and then realized that a lot of the concrete was getting stuck at the bottom, so I had to use the little garden shovel to scrape it loose. This required a lot of muscle, and at one point, the drill started smoking. But I got it mixed, doing most of it by hand, and then over to the hole to put in my first batch. It was here that I realized the best technique was to put in the water first and then add the concrete. This allowed me to mix by hand to get it mixed enough to use the paint stirrer with none stuck to the bottom. It went a lot better after that. From there, I could quickly fill the remainder of the first hole. After a little wait time, I was then able to set the anchor into the concrete. I forgot to use a level on the anchor, and don't mind my ashy ankles. I just wanted to keep going to get this thing done. Life was looking up. Only 3 more to go. And here we have the 4 anchor posts set. After 3 days to cure, I'll come back and turn the screws on each anchor to lock them into the concrete. It was a lot harder than I originally thought, but at least now I had a good foundation laid that would fight hurricanes and allow me to begin putting in the posts that would support the roof I had planned. What kept me going was the vision of how it would look once it was done. See you next time.